All right, so today I'm going to share with you guys 3 tools that you should be using every single day to track your wealth, track your net worth, track your finances. And this is maybe the most powerful thing that you can do if you're trying to transform your personal financial situation. Years ago, and I've shared this story a number of times now, where when I was dead ass broke, I had really nothing to look forward to in life. My bank account was always in the red. I was having to do the mental jujitsu of should I put gas into my car, which at the time I was living in? So, put gas into my home, or should I maybe go get food? When you have to do that mental calculus of do I have enough money for dinner tonight? Or, I guess I can't afford that for dinner. I guess I'll have to get this. Until you've lived in that place, you might take for granted just the power of money to make a human happy. Now, all that's to say is at that point in my life, I was in a very bad financial place. And what made it worse, and I think what actually led me to becoming that person in the first place, was I never acknowledged my financial situation and looked at the bank accounts. I didn't look at my credit card statements. I didn't look at all the bills that I had. I knew they were there. I knew they existed in some kind of ephemeral sense. And I'd get the bills in the mail, and I would get the phone calls from the bill collector, and I would ignore it all. I wouldn't look at those dragons. I knew that they were there, but I kind of had this impression that, there's nothing I can do about them. So what's the point of engaging with them? I can't pay that bill, so why take the phone call? I can't do anything about my bank account being in the red right now, so why look at it? It'll just make me feel like shit, right? So I didn't do it. I just put my head in the sand and I just ignored it. And sure enough, those dragons that you ignore, they just get bigger over time. And so they get so big you can't ignore them, and then you have to fight that dragon, and it's probably going to kick your ass. And so good luck with that. And the journey for me really didn't start to change until I started acknowledging the dragons, specifically around my personal finances. And I started making it a daily habit to start measuring what was happening, to actually look at it and then measure what I wanted. And so for me, the process started with the first tool that I'm going to share with you, which is just a simple daily financial journal. I'm working on something right now with a friend, Molly, called the Prosper Book. And really, it's just a simple tool where you sit down, you look at your bank accounts every single day, and you write down how much is in the bank account, and then you write down how much did you spend on the previous day, what did you spend it on, and then how much did you make. It's very simple at its core. And in the beginning, I didn't have a lot of money coming in, so when I would sit down and I'd write down how much money did I make the previous day, a lot of times it was just 0. That doesn't feel good. But after a certain point of writing zeros, you start to ask yourself, well, what could I do today to make some money, right? And now you're open to the opportunity throughout the day of doing something that maybe brings some money in, or it makes you wary of spending money. That's the other side of it. When you're sitting there and writing down your expenses each day, and you're like, okay, yesterday I spent $7 at the gas station and $13 on this. You're like, $13 on what? What did I spend? What? I didn't even know I had that. Now you're not getting caught off guard by subscriptions anymore that are just continuing to run that you don't need, but you're also starting to look very closely at the things that you're spending your money on. You start to question, is that really worth it? Do I really need that? And just that higher level of financial discipline started to transform my life, because I started to cut my expenses. I started to look for opportunities to make money on a daily basis. And slowly but surely, sure enough, that which you measure gets managed. My finances started to improve. So that was the first tool that I used, was just a daily journal. And I still do this actually pretty frequently, not daily, not even weekly anymore, but I do it enough where I have my fingers on the pulse of my personal finances at all times. And so I've heard people, other financial gurus, who I suspect are not actually all that financially free, to be honest. You see this a lot on YouTube. People will say there's no benefit to managing it and becoming too neurotic about it. And so they'll say measure it once a week or once a month. Don't need to measure it daily. And I'm like, no, that what you focus on expands. And if you really want to change the trajectory of your financial future, really focus on it every single day. Make it the most important thing, and it will improve. So that's number one thing, is your daily journal. The second tool that I use, and these next 2 tools, they're in escalating levels of value. So or maybe decreasing levels of value. Let me reframe this. The first one, anybody can use. The journal, you could do that right now. You could just get a piece of paper, right? The next one is when you're at the next level of wealth, when you start to have money coming in and you have a little bit of money to spend. Then the third tool is probably only if you're like high net worth. So if you're a high net worth individual, stick around for the third one. If you're not, you can bounce. Anyways, second one is called Monarch. Monarch is just, it's like Mint or there's all sorts of these financial aggregators where it will link with your bank account, link with your checking account, and it will track all of these things in real time. Now, this is useful when you have a lot of financial stuff happening. You have a retirement account, you have a Vanguard brokerage account over here, you have 3 credit cards over there, you got this bank account over here, that savings account over there. And you don't want to sit down with your journal every day and open up all these different accounts and like look at that, right? That can be kind of a bit of a homework. Monarch is nice because it just pulls it into one simple dashboard that you can look at, you can review, you can see your cash flow over time, how it's improving or how it's declining. And it's just a nice aggregator. It's very simple. Now, I don't have any like allegiance to Monarch, but you should have some financial software that's aggregating everything for you into one place so that you can see it at a glance. Now, the mistake I see a lot of people make is they confuse having access to the data with having deep insights about the data. So the mistake here, and we do this with our businesses all the time, where it's like, oh, we collected all of this information. Look at the data. And the team will sit down for their weekly meeting and marketing, and they'll look at the numbers, and they'll say, look at it all. And it's like, but nobody stops to ask, like, okay, but what's it mean? Right? It's one thing just to look at the data. It's another, ask yourself, what's it mean? And it can be hard, I find, to sit looking at just a massive data and to come up with deep insights. And that's why I still find that interconnection between actually writing out in your journal, what did you buy, what did you spend, all of that, like writing down the data or manually inputting the data. It's in manipulating that information that insight is born. And so don't just take it for granted that you have the data there and you looked at it. Like, that's not enough. You have to sit and ask yourself, what does it mean? And that requires like a higher level of intentionality, so that you're not just looking at the numbers, you're actually trying to have an insight around it. So that's the second tool, Monarch. The third one, and this one is like Monarch, but it's like Monarch on steroids for high net worth individuals. One of the things that happens as you accumulate more assets is it's really hard to track. At a certain point, you're like, Dennis Felix, who wrote one of my favorite books on wealth, he was the publisher behind Maxim, billionaire, and spent just a ton of money, blew it on all sorts of crazy things. Really interesting guy, but he wrote a book, How to Be Rich. Is that what it's called? How to Be Rich? Something like that. Yeah. It's one of the very few books where a truly high net worth individual, like a billionaire, wrote a book about personal finance and about money and all this stuff. So I highly recommend it. And he was a fantastic storyteller, so very entertaining. But one of the things that he would talk about is if you can count your money, you're not really wealthy. And this was reiterated by another wealthy individual called J. Paul Getty. J. Paul Getty was in like the 70s considered to be the richest private citizen in the world, big oil magnate. He also wrote a book called How to Be Rich. Actually, now that I think about it, it's a very good book too. Actually, he wrote that. This is funny. I'm going off on a tangent here, but so J. Paul Getty, he was hired to not hired, but he was enlisted to write this series of essays for Playboy magazine. And in those essays, it was all about how to be rich. And so then they took all of these essays and they combined them into this book called How to Be Rich. So what's funny about that is, if you think about it, J. Paul Getty wrote these essays for Playboy, and Felix Dennis was the publisher of Maxim. I don't know what the connection here is, but they're pretty similar magazines, Playboy and Maxim. Something about that just breeds a type of really wealthy individual who goes on later in life to write about wealth, I guess. I don't know. Anywho, both of them had the same observation, which was J. Paul Getty. People would come to him and be like, how much are you worth? They say you're the richest man in the world. And he's like, how would I even know what that? He's like, I have no way of knowing what that number is. And the reason for that is because as you get more wealthy, your wealth gets accumulated into these things that they don't have a market. There's no value that you can easily put onto it. So like if you have a private business, how do you value that? Yeah, it's making you millions of dollars. People say you're worth $100 million because of this private business, but like, what's it really worth? I don't know. You can only know what it's worth when you sell it, right? And if you're not willing to sell it, then you're never going to really know what it was worth. Same with art, right? Like art doesn't have this actual value associated with it. It might have a value of how it transacted at the last auction. But you can't be sitting there and being like, well, I bought it for 1.3. It's probably worth about 2 right now. You don't really know until you actually put it on an auction. So what's the point of even like throwing a number out there? And so this third tool is called Kubera, Kubera, and it is a tool for tracking net worth for really high net worth individuals. I would say if you're not doing more than $1 million of net worth, there's really not enough. There's not reason to use this tool, but I found it really useful for helping to track some of those more esoteric values that you're like, I don't know how to track the value of this angel investment that I put into this business 5 years ago. Like it could be 0, maybe someday it's worth something, but you do want to have it there so you can see it because it is an entity that you own. You have it maybe has some value to be realized someday. But I found this helpful to actually wrap my head around all of the different things that I've accumulated into my life that don't have a distinctive value on the bank account right now, but are part of the holdings, let's say. So if that's you, if you're doing over $1 million in your net worth, check out Kubera, Kubera. Pretty cool little tool. It's like Monarch on steroids for high net worth individuals. But those are the 3 tools: journal, Monarch, Kubera. Regardless of where you are on your financial journal, on your financial journey, you should have some tools that you're using to track this. Because again, that which gets tracked gets measured. That which gets measured gets managed. So if you want it to grow, focus on it. And if you don't, if you want to stay a brokey, keep doing what you're doing. No, I'm just kidding. You're doing great. I love you. Guys, see you in the next episode.